Welcome to the 10 Talent Life, conversations about stewardship, family, and purpose, where we specifically ask the question what it might look like to stay on the field at a time in life when most people are heading for the sidelines. Nothing today is meant to tell you what to do. It's simply to create some space to think more deeply, to slow down, and to ask the question, what might I want to put in motion for my family while I still can? Today, we're going to talk about something that I've been observing in families for 20 plus years, and that's how to transfer money from one generation to the next and make the greatest impact. And if we look at how that's done historically or mostly in our culture, then what is done is people work hard, they save up for their retirement, they live off of what they've saved up, and they transfer everything to their family when they die. But there's a problem with this, and it's a matter of timing. So the timing of the transfer matters. And if people are living a full life, then they're living into their 80s and 90s. And so they're transferring assets to the next generation who's in their 60s and 70s, which means that that generation is in their time of preservation, not at a time of multiplication. So if we're looking at multi-generational wealth and we're passing money at a time that it goes into preservation mode, we're sincerely and significantly handicapping the ability of that money to actually multiply, and we're hampering the opportunity to create real multi-generational wealth. So today, we're going to talk about what it looks like to transfer money to the next generation at a time where it can be most useful. So today, I want to unpack why the timing of that transfer matters so much and to discuss what it might look like to do that a little bit differently for you and your family.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about wealth generation and specifically the timing that happens and why that may or may not hamper multi-generational wealth in families. So for the first question I'd like to ask you is, can you unpack the flow of money for the current culturally accepted norms? You know, how does money flow between generations just as a baseline?
Sure. So the wealth transfer flow.
Correct.
Yeah, sure. So currently the most common wealth transfer flow is that people accumulate wealth throughout their lifetime. They live, if they're able to, the objective is to live off the distributions and dividends without eating at the principal. That's the long time standing goal, so that they can then leave whatever's left to their children at death. So it's really a matter of trying to preserve what you can, take care of yourself in retirement, but preserve what you can and pass it on when you die.
Right. So that is it's a one-time transfer, and it's at death. Is there a typical, I guess a typical age for recipients might be 60, 65 years old?
Yeah, if you consider a full life, right, somebody that lives to life expectancy, you're looking into the 80s and many people into their 90s. True. So if you say, well, if they had children when they were 30, then their children are going to be 50s and 60s for the most part.
So what happens to the money at that time?
What we have seen is that the money is generally consumed, right? So we talk about only two uses for money.
Yeah.
It can be seed or feed. So feed means consumption, and there's no multiplication effect to it.
Right.
So we're always talking about multiplication, right? That when we're looking at growing wealth, we're trying to get a multiple by getting a percentage increase each year, and then a percentage increase on that the next year and so forth. So the compounding comes through that multiplication effect. And anything that is consumed, anything that's used for feed, doesn't multiply.
No.
So if what you're asking is, what happens when a generation waits until they're 80 or 90 to pass to the next generation, most often it is consumed.
Okay.
Because it's generally a life enhancement infusion at that point.
Right.
Versus a life transformational addition.
Yeah. So walk me through kind of what we see. And I just want to lay a really good groundwork before we ask questions about kind of an alternative way to think about it.
Sure.
So tell a story. Tell a story about somebody who has done well, maybe probably built something from nothing.
Right.
Accumulated some wealth, maybe helped a little bit throughout life or whatever. They pass, they give their money to their children. What happens to their children? And more importantly, what happens to their children's children?
Sure.
What is the outcome on the current culturally accepted path for the wealth?
So our focus is building multi-generational wealth. So I'm going to answer it in that frame.
Sure.
So it kills it. That's just simply what it does. It just kills the opportunity for multi-generational wealth, because what we're doing with that process is we're kneecapping the possibility.
Okay.
So we're saying if we're not going to apply the funds to the next generation at the time in life when they're in a growth and multiplication mode,
Okay.
we're going to transfer it to them when they're in the preservation mode.
Yeah.
Then what they're going to do is if they've done anything right financially throughout their life by the time they're 60, then they should largely be near financial independence themselves with their own assets.
Yeah.
So when you infuse that with additional funds, the most common outcome is, again, it's a consumption, it's an enhancement of lifestyle.
Sure.
It's not, oh my goodness, I can really put this to work and do something meaningful.
Yeah.
It's I can add this to my nest egg to grow until I die and then pass it to somebody who doesn't want to multiply it again.
Right.
So the reason I say it ruins that is that if we're passing money at that point in life, then we're kneecapping the opportunity for real multi-generational wealth.
Yeah.
And we're just letting each generation live a little bit better in retirement than the prior one.
Yeah. Well, that's only assuming that they don't consume more than what they got.
Well, and that's just where I was going. Because what happens is then, we're very shrewd people. We're aware and we watch things. So we see, oh, my grandparents gave my parents some money. My parents already had some money. My grandparents gave them some money. Now I know that they have more than enough. I don't think I'll prepare as hard for my retirement. I'll wait to get theirs. Right? And so if that happens, then you're not only kneecapping the multi-generational wealth effect, you're cannibalizing it.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you have a generation do that or two, and now there's nothing to pass.
Yeah.
But what happened is the subsequent generations were still expecting it to be passed.
Right.
So now they get to retirement and aren't even prepared.
Yeah.
So when you talk about shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, that's why you can go from poverty to wealth and back to poverty, is because the recipient generations aren't looking to multiply it.
Yeah.
And that's why our passion is growing multi-generational wealth. It's not so people can amass enormous fortunes. It's so that people can continue to engage in moving the ball ahead so that every generation benefits versus just the last generation who took advantage of it without building it.
Right. Okay. So the current way that that wealth flows doesn't work, kills multi-generational wealth.
Yeah, if your focus is building multi-generational wealth, no, it kills it.
Yeah.
If your purpose is everybody's on their own and I made it and you got to make it on your own, well, then that's what's happening, even inadvertently. If they're not doing that on purpose, that's happening by default.
Got it. So for someone who is interested in multi-generational wealth,
right,
what is an alternative way to look at it, and what needs to happen that differently in order to foster that?
You have to have a huge mindset shift early enough to make a difference.
Okay. And what would that look like?
So that looks like deciding early that if I have margin and I have more than what I need to take care of my wife and myself in retirement, then what could I do with that margin while I'm living? That's a major first question that has to be asked. And so what if I did something while I was living instead of when I die?
Right.
And so we have clients do that all the time right now, and it starts with helping. So it starts with gifts of some sort. So it starts by saying, I'm going to, I have adult children with young families, and they have a lot of expenses and a lot of pressure. So I'm going to help with certain things, whether it's annual gifts that they can use any way that they want, buying a vehicle, helping them to buy a home, start a business. It could be 1,000 different wonderful ways to help.
Got it.
So that's where it starts. So thinking early is the first thing. But then because helping is also almost always feed.
Yeah.
It's almost always consumed. So I think that if our generation wanted to start saying, how do we change this generationally? Yeah. Then we can't just look at how do we use money while we're living also for consumption. Right. Right. So yes, our children aren't 60 yet and don't need it, but they need it because they're 30 and they have, 2 kids and they're trying to figure. So it's still consumption. So at some point we have to get out of that consumption, transferring money for consumption and start transferring money for multiplication. Got it.
So what does that look like? And for some people that it might be kind of hard to distinguish the difference between seed and feed and gifting versus helping. And, we've talked about some in the past and in some other episodes, just the difference between helping and gifting and investing. But if you're going to make an investment with seed as opposed to feed, what are the parameters? What does that need to look like?
Well, the major parameters, you have to say, I expect a return on this.
Okay.
There has to be a multiplication pursuit.
Sure.
right? And we know
Expect the
every
seed to grow.
investment, right? Every investment doesn't work out,
Right.
But every good investment intends to work out, right?
Sure.
Intends to multiply.
That's true.
So you start to say a gift, I don't expect a return on it, or the return I expect is entirely relationally or
Sure.
or
Non-financial.
I appreciate that it's helping my children not be under so much strain.
Right.
So there's a return, but not a multiplication return. So the multiplication return, the investment has to have a multiplication expectation, which means that it can't just be given with no strings attached.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between gifting and investing. Very big difference.
Yeah. So in investing and in making those investments, what does it require from you as the investor, and what does it require from the next generation as the person receiving the investment? Like what does it take as kind of a partnership between those two generations to set in motion a multi-generational wealth effect?
Yeah. I would say from the parents' generation, it requires a couple things. It requires more sacrifice for sure than the recipient generation. And it requires a clarity as to what you're investing in. So I'll talk about our family. So our family, we are using money as a metric, and we're using money as a tool. So we are using money, or we want to utilize this with our adult children, use money as a tool to build multi-generational wealth, but specifically as a metric to say that if we can, instead of going shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, if we can have every generation build, then we believe that's indicative of passing our values, which is our real objective.
Yeah.
So our real objective isn't billions of dollars in the family in a generation or two. Our real objective is that the values pass, and we are trying to use money as a tool, as one of the tools to do that.
Yeah.
So for us, the value that we're trying to pass is faith, right? And all of the many wonderful values that come with the Christian faith. And so we are looking to have our family be strong in relationship, and we believe that being strong financially, being strong in relationships, being strong in life requires faith. And so that's what we're most trying to grow. So that's the thing that we are attempting to move the most.
So you talked about money as a metric, and a metric specifically to measure values and faith. How does that work? And how can that be true?
Yeah, well, it works imperfectly, right? So we have to understand that you could have money grow generation to generation theoretically and not have the faith component or the values component.
Sure.
Although I would argue that's very unlikely.
Yeah.
That what's going to happen is eventually, because if you don't have the values right, eventually somebody is going to feel entitled.
Yeah.
And the moment that you feel entitled to it versus responsible for it, then the wealth game is over.
That's a very good
It doesn't matter
distinction.
how much money you've had in the family, and we've seen that with very, like the uber wealthy families, that it's like they have more money than they could ever spend, and then all of a sudden they don't.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's not hundreds of years later, that's 2 generations later.
Right.
So that's why we're looking at it. It's an imperfect metric, but we're saying that, again, because that's what we are trying to do, is to build a strong family.
Yeah.
We believe that faith is what a strong family is built on. And I just happen to be in the field of money and recognize what a powerful tool that is to use. And so that's why we focus on that.
Yeah. So in investing in the next generation, why is it important to make an investment? Like, if you believe you parented your children well and you've passed your values, why is it important to continue to do anything differently as opposed to just saying, well, I raised my kids good, so when I pass, and I know they're good with money.
Right.
So when I pass the money along, I know they won't blow it. What's the difference between that and making investments, and why is an investment even necessary?
Right. Well, I think the investment is most necessary if you're trying to specifically move that measure on values.
Yeah.
So if all you're concerned about is financial prudence, then investment's a little bit less necessary. Although I would argue that your child that is good with money is not necessarily going to have a child who's good with money.
That's true.
So even if you say, I don't care about the values and the faith is not a thing for me, it's not important, it's about passing money and making a stronger financial family generation after generation. If that's your objective, then that can be pursued. But I think it's going to break down, because we see a lot of times, I think that's the first thing that our clients look at, is that I'm either concerned about my child financially or I'm not.
Right.
And so they're viewing their life in silos. So they're looking at their financial prudence separately from their faith or their values, silos. And so they might say, well, they have all these other personal problems, right? But they're really good with money. And so I feel okay giving them millions of dollars when I die.
Yeah.
right? And what happens with that, I think it's worth asking a little deeper question to say, what if we didn't silo out our perspective on our children? What if we said, how are they as a whole person? So I'm glad they're great financially, but they're kind of a mess here relationally, or they have some other things that are concerning that is going to eventually impact the finances, right? Just like I would say to somebody who says, well, I have the sweetest, most wonderful children who have very sincere faith, but are lousy with money. They should look at that holistically too. They shouldn't excuse the fact that they're lousy with money because they're sweet and sincere in their faith. I think that if we want to build strong multi-generational families, we have to say, how do we build everything? How do we build strong marriages? How do we build strong families? How do we build strong faith? And how do we build strong finances? Why would we settle for you're pretty good at one and ignore the rest? And so I think financially it's easy to do that because everybody's concerned in the financial field. People who have wealth are concerned about the wealth being wasted.
Right.
Because they made a sacrifice to build that wealth.
Right.
So they don't want it to be wasted, and they don't also want it to ruin somebody else's life.
Yeah.
So they measure that one metric of are they good with money or are they not good with money? And like I said, even if the child is good with money, but they're not good in some of these other areas, then their children being good with money, that's going to erode as well.
Yeah.
So even if all you care about is money, I think it's going to break down over time.
So it's even a consideration of not your children, but your children's children, and the ongoing.
You have to think multi-generational
cycle of it.
We have this perspective in life in which we're viewing a world 6 inches from our hand.
Yeah,
like we're just not looking beyond that, and our cultural current is that. It's go, go, go. It's always just reacting to what's in front of you. Being really reflective and intentional on a long-term basis is not how our culture operates.
No, it's not.
And we're under constant interruption from cell phones and technology and just everything in a very fast-moving world that it's hard to do that. So I definitely believe that we can't look at our children. We can look at our grandchildren. So the way that we say it, when Nicole and I, your mom and I talk, is that we say, what are the things that we can do that create the highest probability of our grandkids living in the world that we want them to live in?
Yeah.
And we can't control the world. We understand that, but we mean from a family perspective. So am I satisfied as a grandfather that your child has money, but no work ethic, no character, and am I satisfied with that? No, I'm not. I would actually, if I had to choose, I'd rather them have work ethic and character than money. Yeah. Because if they have work ethic and character, they'll find a way to provide for themselves. Right. So if I'm using the wrong metric and if I'm not thinking far enough, then I'm not building strong multi-generational families or multi-generational wealth. I'm actually saying just because I'm looking at you and not looking beyond that, and because you're good with money, that, certainly everything else is going to work out. And I think that that's a naive view.
In the vein of thinking far, if the ultimate goal is an ongoing perpetuation within the family, why not skip straight to your grandkids? Yeah, well, and that happens, right? Yeah. So it happens for two reasons. It happens because a lot of times people aren't starting to transfer money until they're a little bit later. So let's say they're in their 70s and now their children are 50 or 45 and their kids are 20. Well, the grandparent can see that they can help that new young adult starting out in a family. And so it's tempting to do that. The grandchildren and the grandparents often haven't had contention in their relationship, right? Where sometimes parents and children have contention, and it's easy to look like a hero in the eyes of the grandkids. So sometimes a small investment can make a big difference. So think of it this way. Buying a car for a 25-year-old is a huge impact. Yeah. Buying a car for a 45-year-old is a life enhancement. Right. Or should be, right? If they've had their life correct at all. Yeah. So we're shifting that. So I'm glad you asked that question, because when we say, how do we create an environment in which our grandkids live in the world that we want them to live in? Yeah. Then we don't want to start with the grandkids. We actually want to start with you, because we won't be here. And when we're long gone, you will continue to be a mentor to that child. So our focus is, how do we actually empower you to be the hero and the one and the mentor in their life, versus us being the hero and then gone, right? Yeah.
and you not having that. So we have said, it started with when I started thinking multi-generational, I was thinking kids and grandkids and beyond. And it took me a minute to kind of shift that to say, no, I need to focus on one generation.
Yeah.
And Mom and I need to focus on your generation. And we need to do that as thoroughly as we can. Your generation has to accept it and apply it. But if it doesn't, so let's say you didn't, you made very poor choices, you were uninvestable, right? You wouldn't do things that we could invest in, so we can't even quote unquote help you or invest in you to help you get ahead because you won't do that.
Yeah.
If we then bypass you and help your child, then not only does it have the child looking to us as the hero, but it allows you to neglect your responsibility because you're like, Mom and Dad will take care of it.
That's true.
So we looked through that whole process and came to as much as we would like to do that. And hopefully we'll be able to do that, right? But it'll be secondary to what you guys are doing. What we really want to do is we want to say, how do we have you children who are willing to engage, willing to be investable? How are we willing to invest in that and just do as much as we can there so that you can do for your kids, which is our grandkids.
Right. So what about people with complex assets? So say a business.
Yeah.
Or people that have wealth, but it's not liquid. You're not passing money. You're passing something that generates money or some sort of asset of some kind.
Sure.
So for them, what does investment look like in the next generation, and what can be important about that process?
Well, the earlier you think about this, the better. So here's why this is important. So the path is to build a business, have it be worth something, sell it, and live off of that. So when I sell it, I release myself from the daily grind of the business.
Yep.
I release myself of the risk of the business, and I create liquidity. Those are all great things. However, then I have to take that liquidity and invest it in something. So I'm going to have risk associated with it.
That's true.
Somehow.
It's good.
But I don't have to show up every day to work. I don't have to worry about employees. There's a whole lot of benefits to doing that.
Right.
So that's one avenue to go. That's the most common avenue. But if you've thought about this early, you might start looking at your business as one of the ways that you invest in the next generation.
Yeah.
So you might say, you have to have margin. So selling a business creates liquidity and margin, let's say. Yeah. But owning a business can create margin. It just might be in cash flow versus in a $5 million liquidity event.
Right.
So now let's say I have $250,000 of excess cash flow a year by keeping the business, right? I don't get the $5 million. It still is tied up. But I can apply that excess cash flow as investable assets to my family. So there's a lot of different ways to think about it. But the benefit of the business, I think this is such a great opportunity for people who have a business that's worth keeping. Right? Yeah. It's a good business. They have good team members, so it doesn't keep them a slave to it, but they can own it. It gives them a place to employ their family, right, for training.
Yeah.
So not for family employment.
Right.
Not just so you get a job, you get paid. No, you have to be worth it. Right.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That's incredibly important.
Yeah, you have to be investable. You have to do your side of the equation.
Yeah.
Or it's a gift. And we're not talking about gifting. We're talking about investing.
Right.
So if I'm going to invest in you, then yes, I'll give you a shot at a job that you wouldn't be qualified for, or I wouldn't give to somebody who wasn't family. Yeah. But you need to step into it. Right. We're going to give you a minute. We're going to give you training, but you need to step into it. If you don't, you can get fired from that job. Right. So, and I think that that's a very important thing to have, but it gives you a chance to employ your family. So it gives you a chance to go shoulder to shoulder with them, teach them, mentor them, pay them, as well as have excess cash flow that you can apply to other things in your life. So thinking ahead allows you to say, should I have a liquidity event? And then what should I do with that liquidity?
Right.
Or should I keep the family business and use that as a discipleship tool and as a financial mechanism that instead of, like I said, the $5 million exit, it's a $250,000 excess cash flow per year.
Yeah. So let's talk practical just for a second. So I'll lay out what I would picture as the traditional multi-generational wealth picture.
Sure.
I make a boatload of money, like a boatload. And then I sell my business or whatever happens. I retire, and then I set up a trust for my kids, and they get to live off that, I guess.
Right.
Like that's the traditional picture. The outcome for this, for me as the investor in the next generation, the outcome for me to do that is a known. I know that I can make the money. I know I can sell the business. I know what I'm worth. I know what I can pass on.
Right.
If I do this, the outcome doesn't sound explosive, where I make a whole bunch of money and then pass it on to my kids. It sounds kind of incremental. And what does that look like for my personal wealth over that time?
So here's the world of money. So the world of money and building wealth is more is better. That's just what it is. The perspective is I want to make as much as I can.
Right.
So let's just call that the default perspective.
Sure.
And then let's say, what are your family goals? So I'll just define the family goals that Nicole and I have. So
Please.
We want every generation to be stronger than the generation before it in every way, right? So I'll just say something very controversial, right? Especially for a wealth management guy, right? So if my success is so extreme that it doesn't allow the next generation to grow it or to build it, then I'm actually hampering the opportunity for every generation to be stronger.
Interesting.
So if you take that first scenario and say somebody has extreme wealth, and let me remind me to come back to Warren Buffett because I want to use that as an example in a moment.
Got it.
But you have extreme wealth. Or substantial wealth because you controlled it. You said, I didn't invest in my family so that they could blow it up or that it ended up being less. I invested in the thing that I was being very successful at because that's what makes sense. If it's working, you don't handicap it, you keep growing it,
exactly.
Right? Which you should, absolutely. So let's say that you do that and then you pass it on and now your family, let's say you pass it on in a manner that they're taken care of. So first of all, you have inadvertently neutered their ambition.
That's true.
Because they're saying, I'll never be as good as dad.
Yeah.
And I have more than I'll ever need to spend.
Good point.
So why bother, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing that you have inadvertently done.
We touched on an important aspect, though, which is the competition aspect of money.
Right.
And looking at your parents, and I think everybody can kind of relate to, I want to do a little better than my dad did.
Right.
I want my kids to do a little better than I do.
Right.
Like everyone can kind of relate to that idea.
Right. So how uninspiring is it if your dad has made so much money, you're like,
how could I do better than that?
Right. How would I do that? So that's a real thing. And like I said, I want to come back to that. And Warren Buffett's a good example of that, I think, in a moment. But the other side of that is, so then what I would suggest is it doesn't have to be an either or.
Sure.
Especially if you've made that much money, then you've got a lot of margin.
Right.
And a lot of margin gives you a lot of opportunity for investment.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that engaging the family while they're younger, so not at 60, so in their 30s and 40s, and allowing them an opportunity to try to respond to your handout, reaching out to say, take my hand and let me show you how to do this. See if they'll respond and see if they'll grow. And the ones that are a good investment, that are responding to it and doing things, invest heavier and heavier and heavier. So you're teaching them to fish instead of giving them fish.
Got it.
So I would say if you can still keep making money, because if that's what your company's doing, you definitely don't want to handicap that. But you want to recognize that can I at the same time use some of this margin to help teach them? Now I said I want to come back to Warren Buffett. Here's the thing. Warren Buffett made an enormous amount of money, right? And we have some people in our generation that you've got Bezos and Elon Musk and Zuckerberg. So you've got these people that's happened. And so, but Buffett is giving the majority of his wealth away. He already has, and he will more, right? So he has had this scenario, right? Where he has made so much money that the probability of his family exceeding that in the next generation is unbelievably low.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know how that's even possible, especially since he's 90 now or whatever.
Yeah, he's very
old. They're already 70 and 60s and 70s. So he, in a sense, that created an issue, but he's trying to solve it by giving the money away versus giving it to the family. So, and I don't know, I haven't read, and I don't know what his purposes are and all that, but I'm assuming there's something here to where he has seen the damage that money can do and the entitlement that it can create, and then all the cancer that comes along with that within families. So I'm assuming that probably has a lot to do with what he's giving, even more than just being charitably minded. He's saying, I don't want to harm the family long term. So he's trying to navigate that. And I think that's important. So I don't know how that's actually navigated, because every once in a while you'll have a generation that just does so much more than just a linear growth from generation to generation, that then you have to say, okay, well, how do I not just set up a trust to carry the next 3 generations and then be gone? And in the meantime, ruin all these relationships and the quality of the people and the values and all that. That's not a good outcome. So how do I avoid that?
I'm glad you brought that up. So wealth can be just as easily a detriment to the growth of the strength of your family, generation to generation, as it may be easier a detriment than a blessing.
Right.
So, part of my question that I asked is kind of wondering, in the past, you've told me you'd rather leave less with more character than more with less character.
Right.
So kind of unpack that for me, if you will.
Yeah, if you only think of money, more is always better.
Right.
So you have to take a bigger view on, what am I here for? right?
Exactly.
What is my purpose?
Right.
And so we understand that our purpose from a faith perspective is discipleship,
Right.
right? So we talk about discipleship, and if somebody's unfamiliar with that, that's essentially just as you walk along the road, leading people, and in the Bible, it's literally to salvation, like leading them to learn how to live as a follower of Christ. That's what that is. But in life, it's just everything. It's learning how to live. It's walking that road.
Yeah.
And so we don't answer that question just by money. Now, is our objective from a business perspective to create more profit and more money and more margin? Absolutely. That is absolutely there. But it's in service of discipleship.
Right.
So we talk about money wanting to be a trophy. And in our society, the cultural norm is that money's a trophy. It's a look what I've done, look what I have, here's my reward. And we are very intentional about trying to continue to fight that cultural current to say, no, money is a tool. So in our family, money's a tool. If you have $1 billion, it's a tool. If you have $1, it's a tool. So money is something that can be used to accomplish the other things that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
So that's why, from a business perspective, yes, we want to make more money. That's what we're going to focus on. That's the metrics in which you measure a successful business. But that's not a metric in which you measure a successful life.
Yeah.
So that's why we say if we had to choose, we'd rather pass no money or little money and the values in our faith. That's easy. That's not even hard for us to say that.
Yeah.
But again, I look at, instead of having a siloed life, having an integrated life, and saying, because of our faith and the values that should exemplify in our life, we should be more trustworthy. We should work with more excellence. We should do these things that actually lead to more profitability.
Yeah.
Those should go hand in hand.
That's true.
So we're not satisfied even just saying, well, our family has good faith. No, well then it should be demonstrated in life.
Yeah.
If our family is truly living out their faith, are they working with more excellence? Are they more trustworthy? Are they, and then is that multiplying wealth as well? It absolutely should.
Yeah. So can you give us an example, a rosy example, of what it would look like to successfully sort of set this system up of multi-generational wealth and what it actually takes to perpetuate it kind of just in a linear way, all condensed?
Yeah. If we could,
if we could just have a perfect success.
my ideal, right? My perfect ideal right now is that our business would generate enough excess profit to have, because I don't intend to sell it.
Yeah.
Right. So we are intentionally not exiting our business.
Right. So step one, that's different.
Yeah. You're part of the business
Versus
with me.
selling,
Right. So we're not saying we're not looking for an exit and a liquidity event. We're looking to instead have our business be a goose that lays golden eggs.
Yeah.
Right. So it's something that we work with excellence and trustworthiness and all these things so that it continues to be this healthy goose that lays, that creates revenue.
Yeah.
And that revenue would exceed the expenses and we would have excess profit. So we'd have excess profit, and through that excess profit, then we could go to your generation and say, what are your giftings? So we have, the 10 talent life is how we reference that, is what are you equipped with and how do you make the most of that?
Right.
And can we partner with you?
Yeah.
So, you're in the business.
Hatch an egg?
Right. So can we build another goose?
Exactly.
Right. So you're in this business with me. So we're going to work on this goose together. Right. But we might have, we have a son who has a pressure washing business, and a couple son-in-laws that have other businesses that they're doing. And so we might say, well, that's a great business. You've got these great gifts. That's where you're gifted, or whatever the work might be. And let's, instead of having that be a job that you own, because it's a single man business, what if we could turn that into a business that you operate? Right. And it employs several families. And through those several families, you have the opportunity for caring for them. Yeah. And creating discipleship and bringing them along, as well as providing for them financially and building wealth for the family. So, and then through that experiment, and so through our family with as many children as we have, maybe there would be multiple businesses. Yeah. And in an ideal world, if we're going for ideal, then each of those businesses would support each other. Yeah. So if they're complementary, that the pressure washing business would be helping to give resources or referrals or whatever to the home services business, which, sure. So whatever those things are, it doesn't matter. But if there can end up being a complementary aspect to it, then that would be great. But so that in the next, so again, I'm talking about the grandchildren's generation. So we love you, but we're trying to build a world for the grandchildren. Okay. So in that case, then think about your children. If they had 4 or 5 uncles and aunts that had various businesses, what's the probability that your child would have gifting that might fit one of those businesses?
That's true.
So maybe not your business.
Yeah.
Right? But maybe one of those businesses.
That's
what
true.
if they could go and work there and be discipled, be given an opportunity to have a job that otherwise they might not get, but be pushed to grow, be expected to perform and what have you. And then that made them stronger and gave them opportunities. So if I was going to build a perfect scenario, and if that all is successful, there'll be a ton of money that probably, or wealth that's created because of that. So that's why I say building multi-generational wealth is a metric that you can measure to say, how well is this working? But even without just saying, here's what the family is worth, again, why? Like if you liquidate it all, then you have to invest it anyway. So it's not about that, but every family is financially responsible, financially cared for, taking care of employees, building. So it's about building people, but using wealth as a metric to see how can we use that tool of money to build people.
The difference on that is you can't put a number on it. So you don't know what that'll be.
No,
so like
no idea.
If you just kept it all in-house, so to speak, you could, we're financial people. We can crunch the numbers and have a rough guess 30 years from now what that would probably be. Where with this, who knows? So you have to be willing to kind of let the outcome go. It sounds like, as far as just, I hope the outcome will be success, but I don't even know what success will look like from a dollar perspective. Like,
what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to sacrifice, profit from a company where I can have a pretty good understanding of if I reinvested in that company, what my additional profit would be, to go into something else and give a risk. And I think that the way that that'll work out, and who knows, right? But I think the way that'll work out is that initially, as we start other businesses, they won't be as profitable. But then there'll be the snowballing effect to where the power of the cooperative effort over time will actually be much greater than if I just kept reinvesting into my own business. So we'll always reinvest in our own business, but I expect to have excess profits that we could say, when there's a good investable idea, right? It can't just be an idea, but can we do that as a family? If we could do that, when we're talking about ideals, if we could do that as a family, that'd be amazing.
That would be. It'd be great for discipleship outcomes too. Everybody working together, and I could totally see that. So is there anything else you want to add that we didn't talk about?
No, I think there's just so many opportunities in this, but I would just say that the biggest thing is being willing to think deeper. Right. To not just say, what are my friends doing? What is culture doing? And not to just keep chasing money, inadvertently making it a trophy versus a tool, but to say, no, money serves me. Money serves me to do what I am responsible to do in life, of whatever that is, and the people that I have around me and so forth. I don't serve money, so I don't just keep working for more money. I don't just keep accumulating more money just for money's sake. What is the value of that? But no, what is this tool and how do I make the most of it? So that's what we have come to and continue to grow in our thinking of. And as we have adult children, then now we have somebody to partner with. Right. So I think that this was something we didn't fully, and we probably don't fully understand it now, but certainly we have more understanding now as we have adult children than we did when you guys were 16. Right. And we did things when you were young, right? We started a lawn business for you and your brother to do. And so we've been toying with these things and we've been trying to say, how do we move this needle? But my vision has dramatically expanded on what it can be from a financial and a business perspective. And then your mom and I have been able to then look at that. Well, what does it mean from a relational perspective and a faith perpetuation perspective? And so even though your mom's not involved in the money side, she is absolutely involved in the family foundations and discipleship side. And so we're even seeing this something where instead of her keeping grandkids and me working, into my later years, because again, if we're going to have, a dozen grandkids at the house every day, I'm going to want to go to work, probably. So instead of us living these two separate lives, doing two separate things, that we actually, now that I can engage with the adult children on business and wealth building, and she's investing in actually helping the mothers build the children. Again, she's not going to build the grandchildren by skipping the mothers. She's going to work with the mothers. So that the grandchildren have wonderful mothers doing wonderful things in the family, and she's going to contribute to that. And now we're saying, yes, we can't we can't control the outcome of this as much as if it were things that we were actually in charge of ourselves. But by being a mentor and a partner with your generation and doing it, we just expect you'll do so much more than we could if we did it on our own. So that's where I think that's where the enthusiasm is coming from.
So one last question. What does it take from my generation as far, because there are people that want to do this that just don't have, they don't have children who are willing for whatever reason.
Sure.
And not that they never would be, but just at their current starting point, they've maybe never talked about this. They've never considered it.
Right.
What is necessary in my generation to participate in this successfully? What does it take from me?
It takes humility. It takes a willingness to be coached. Right. So you have a carrot.
Yeah.
And you have to say the carrot's worth it.
Right.
So the carrot is, I will invest in you. I will partner with you.
Right.
I will mentor you. I will whatever. So that's the carrot. And because I have resources you don't have, that's why it's a carrot. Right. But the give is, but I might not do it the way you want to do it.
Right.
I might not do it as fast as you want to do it. I might not value all the same things that you value. You might be chasing money even inadvertently as a trophy, and I'm trying to slow you down and understand we're building people. And yes, we're going to build wealth, but we're going to build wealth through building people, and that could be, you could feel like that's frustrating and a hindrance. So it really takes humility to say, you've got to look at Mom and I as in parenting as well. So your wife and the other daughters and daughter-in-laws have to say, am I willing to accept that they might know something I don't?
Yeah.
And that there could be value to me following, even though I don't have to, because you're not under authority. There's no requirement to do any of these things. So am I willing to follow to do that? So it takes a ton of humility to do that.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of trust. So my job and Mom's job is to be as trustworthy as possible, recognizing that we're flawed and we're going to let you down. We won't do this perfectly all the time, but to be as trustworthy as possible and to truly do what we believe is in your best interest, even if it's at an expense for us. And your generation's responsibility is to be willing to trust and to be humble enough to say, although I don't agree and I want to do it a different way and they're hindering me, I recognize that maybe they know something I don't.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that concludes our episode. We hope you'll tune in to our main series, which is our 10 Talent Life podcast, where we unpack some of these ideas in detail, but we'll continue to do these one-offs as they come up to just dive more deeply into specific topics. We hope you'll keep listening.
Thanks for listening to the 10 Talent Life. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, we hope you'll take time to sit with it a little bit and consider what you might want to put in motion for your family while you still can. We look forward to continuing the conversation with you next time.